The Viola Gamba is a bowed instrument. It comes from Italy, and it comes from a tradition of Spanish instruments like the Viola and the rebab. The one that I have here today is a bass viola da gamba. It's a rather large instrument. It's about the size of a cello, but you'll see it has kind of a broader bass than a cello does. It also has more strings than a cello does. And those strings are tuned in fourths with a third in the middle, so it sounds like this. The viola da gamba is kind of descended from the early guitar, the lute family. They're tuned in similar ways with fourths and a third in the middle. And like the lute, it also has frets. When you have frets and you're playing fretted notes with a bow, what it does is it turns every single note into an open string. You get this overarching resonance that is characteristic of the sound of the instrument. Here's an open G string. Now if I put my finger right behind the fret on the G string and play an A, you'll notice that it rings for a similar amount of time as the open G. And it has kind of the same amount of resonance. And so when you're playing chords, this creates this kind of halo effect around the chords. Not only do the open strings resonate a lot, but all the fretted strings that I'm putting fingers down on also resonate a lot. That's what drew me to the sound of the viol, actually. Just the beauty of the sound. The music that we have for this instrument kind of really spans a large breadth of abilities. The viol was a really popular instrument both for virtuosic players, musicians who worked in courts, and also for musicians who were amateurs in these wealthy families that owned these chests of viols. In the Baroque period, there's really distinct kind of nationalities to music. When you're playing gamba music, that same distinction applies. The Italian music is often very fiery and passionate, and it moves between things very quickly and chaotically, so emotionally fueled. French music is this music of it's still of great emotional capacity, but of more elegance and grace, and in some ways more simple, and in other ways way more complex because it's conveying the same things, but with this whole other cover and facade of graciousness and elegance and grace. There's just this really wide breadth of music that was written for the instrument during that Renaissance and Baroque period, and we have so much music because it was both a professional instrument and an amateur's instrument, and so the music is very accessible, and then when you get to the other end of things, very, very difficult. The cello comes from the violin family of instruments. It's more well suited towards playing bass lines or melodic lines that are single. Whereas on the gamba, a lot of our music is polyphonic. We're playing chords, but we're also playing different lines of music within those chords. And the frets make that easier. It makes it easier for me to find a chord when I have frets and I have to remember a hand shape rather than remembering where every single finger goes. I'm remembering the pattern of where my hand goes. The violin family of instruments, I mean, the two smaller sizes are very different from gambas in the sense that they're played da braccio, or on the arm, whereas the viola da gamba, gamba actually means leg, So even the smallest size of viola da gambas, those partitus, those are played on the legs. Cellos are played overhand like this, and playing overhand creates a very different technique for your right arm. When you play overhand, you get a very strong down bow, which is the motion that is pulling the bow. And you get a very light up bow, which is the motion that's pushing the bow. And this makes sense because when you look at what I'm doing, when I'm playing the down bow, I'm starting with my hand very close to the point of contact with the string. So that's naturally going to be louder than the up bow, where my hand is very far away from the point of contact with the string. So it creates kind of a natural inégal, or an inequality between the different strokes. So overhand bowed instruments do this really well. And I can make the same kind of sound with my bow playing it underhand. But if you were watching carefully, you probably saw that I was reversing the direction, actually. That my stronger bow was that pushing motion, and my weaker bow was that pulling motion. And this has to do a little bit with how we center our weight. So when I push the bow, you notice my arm is very close to my stomach, and this creates a lot of sound. And when I pull the bow, I'm starting to move my arm away, which weakens the sound. So again, I'm creating the same unequalness between my push bows and my pull bows, but it's the opposite than it is with the violin family. And that's very interesting, and it's hard for a lot of beginning viol players to wrap their head around, which it still kind of is hard for me to wrap my head around because I started on cello, actually, and so it can be confusing which direction is the correct direction to go. The construction of a violin or a cello is meant to create a more forceful sound than a viola da gamba. And so as churches and concert halls and courts became larger and larger, the viol was kind of eclipsed by these other instruments. And it happened in Italy first, but it gradually happened everywhere. The French court was kind of a high period for the viol during the reign of Louis, the Sun King. And at that time, the great composer Lully was there. And there were these two great gamba players that were there as well. There was Marin Maé, and after him was Forqueray. And they were kind of the heyday of the viol in France. And then in Germany, there was J.S. Bach wrote these great gamba sonatas for viol, and C.P.E. Bach wrote for them. And slowly after them, things kind of began to peter out. And that was kind of the last that we saw of the viol. It was eclipsed by the violin family. The louder instruments won. In the modern century, the viol was kind of revived during the early historical performance movement, and that's why nowadays you see so many young people taking up this instrument and learning about the history of it. I actually was introduced to the viol first when I was 12 years old, which is much younger than most people get introduced to the viol. My mom took me to a Chatham Baroque concert in Northern Virginia, where I grew up. And there were people there playing the viol, and I thought, oh, that looks kind of like a cello, but it's not the same as a cello, it's somehow better. I happened to get introduced in the audience there to a fellow named Tom McCracken, who was a collector of viols and a historian of viols, and he's very active in that community. He said, well, why don't you come over and you can try one? And so I tried one for the first time when I was 12. And then I went off to the Eastman School of Music, where I did my undergraduate degree, and I was studying modern cello there. Two of the world's greatest experts in early music teach there at Eastman, Paul Odette and his wife, Christel Thielmann, who is a viola da gamba player. I heard Christel play Viola da Gamba, and I thought to myself, oh, I need to play this instrument. I need to learn how to do this. It took me some time to be bold enough to ask her for lessons, but once I did, I was just hooked immediately. And it's been kind of a love affair ever since. I found the instrument that is mine. It's my voice, and it's what I love.